And we're back. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source, and also Inside Sports. We really want to thank you for listening and truly hope you're enjoying the program. Well, it just happened. It's the NBA trade deadline, and there was a lot of player movement, particularly around one team. And here to talk NBA trade deadline with me is my good friend. He is our NBA man in the know. It's Anthony Barbarin. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm sitting back, looking at all these trades, analyzing what's going on. Um, enjoying the NBA trade deadline is probably the best in sports, and I think this year we got a good show.
We did indeed. I'll be honest with you. I thought it was going to be a dead one because going into it, it looked like there was going to be a very hard and difficult time for a lot of teams to make those moves because there were not going to be a lot of buyers, and there were going to be a ton of sellers. Well, lo and behold, that kind of came out to fruition. But there was one buyer that was buying and selling galore, and that was the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I guess we've got to start with them. Your thoughts on their trades, and I'll tell everybody who they got rid of and who they brought in. They got rid of, starting with Dwayne, in separate deals, mind you, Dwayne Wade, Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Channing Frye, and also other parts, along with draft choices, second round draft choice to I believe the Kings or the Jazz, and then also as well they brought back in, they also traded out a first round pick to the Lakers, and they brought back in Jordan Clarkson, Larry Nance Jr., Rodney Hood, and George Hill, bringing in some different kind of firepower, a little bit younger in most cases, and maybe a little bit better as far as outside shooting, and possibly even a little bit better defensively, which has been a major deficit for the Cavs this season. Your thoughts on the Cavs transactions? Because as a Lakers fan, I could just say just this simply: thank you very much, Cleveland, for the nice first round draft pick to get rid of two bench players.
I think I love what Cleveland did. I think they realized that they were too old. They were too slow. And I think their players that they had on their roster had a sense of not entitlement, but a lack of passion.
And chemistry. Their chemistry was really bad as well.
Their chemistry was bad, but I think they had guys who felt like they were at a certain level in their career or who they were. And that hindered them from playing the game the way they needed to play it in order for that team to be successful. And I think they got rid of a lot of those players. And the thing about the guys that they brought in are young guys who are not proven, who have been moderately individually successful on other teams and on bad teams and mediocre teams, but now have brought in guys who are hungry to prove that they can do what they did on those teams on a winning team.
Well, and I'll tell you what, that was a great trade, I believe, for Cleveland to get in all those players. Although I'm going to say right now, again, they did overpay when it concerns the Lakers, because not only did they free up a lot of cap space, the Lakers did, when they acquired Isaiah Thomas and Channing Frye, but these were players, Jordan Clarkson especially, that they were desperately trying to get off their contract for the next 2 years, and they got paid to do so with a first round draft pick, when it was kind of looking like they would have to give up a first round draft pick to get off of Clarkson's contract. So I think the Lakers did extremely well in as far as their future going forward, and making sure their options are open, whether they can sign 1, 2, or even 3 marquee free agents down the road. All they got to do is somehow manage to get rid of that Luol Deng contract, and they can really, really do a number on the free agency market over the next 2 years. But be that as it may, Where do you think, with all this new firepower, and in fact, they also got rid of Iman Shumpert as well.
Right.
That experiment, as far as him being a nice complementary player to LeBron, has ended. Where do you see the Cleveland Cavaliers now in the East, as far as being a major firepower now, back to our thoughts in making them above the Boston Celtics and also as well the Toronto Raptors? Or do you still see them behind them when the playoffs come? It looks like schedule wise they won't be able to move above them in the standings by the end of the season. It's too late now, but do you still think that they're going to be able to overcome those two when it comes to playoff time?
I do. I honestly never had the other two teams above them in terms of being in the playoffs, even with the old roster that they had. Um, it's what they do. They're not concerned with being the number one seed. They're more concerned with playing well going into the playoffs and having the team that is in a 7 game series going to be the better team. But I do think that now, for most people, it makes them feel like they're the favorites again. Um, with the old team, I felt like they still had 3 players who, in any given game in the playoffs, can get you 30 to 40 points. Um, a great game in 40 points, a really good game in 30. And I thought that the other two teams in Toronto, who had two, being DeRozan and Lowry, and in Boston, who, in my opinion, only has one in a 7 game series, I didn't think that they could match what Cleveland would be able to do. But I think this team that they have, I think now they have two guys in Love and LeBron who can get you those numbers, but they have a number of guys who can get you less, and on any given night, multiple. So you have Jordan Clarkson who can get you 20 to 25 in the night. George Hill who can do the same thing. Rodney Hood, I think, averaged close to 20 points a couple of seasons ago. So he's one of the guys who can do that. But they also will be okay with scoring 12 or scoring 13 or scoring 8, as long as, as long as they're winning. And I think that, coupled with their youth and length and ability, because the thing about the NBA and the way it's being played now with the sharing of the ball and the ball movement, is that individual defense is not as important as being able to recover and cover, as far as team defense goes. And when you have guys who aren't quick enough and not fast enough, they don't have enough energy, then you that third effort gets lost, and that's when guys get wide open shots or wide open cuts to the basket, and blowouts happen.
Well, I think they are very competitive now in the East. In fact, I do put them now as the slight favorite over Boston and Toronto. I think all three are now closer than ever before, as far as one of them overcoming the other and being put out on top. The other major trade, I guess, that you'd have to talk about is Detroit acquiring Blake Griffin from the Clippers, who unfortunately didn't do much else at the trade deadline outside of sign Lou Williams to an outstanding cap friendly contract. I don't know how he signed for that little, especially the fact that he's almost playing at an all-star level. So I ask you your thoughts on the Blake Griffin trade, where he goes to Detroit for Avery Bradley, Boban Marinovic, and also as well Tobias Harris and some other stuff. I thought it was a great trade for Detroit in a place where they can't get a free agent and they do need to fill up a new arena very, very quickly with a marquee name. Does it put them into the playoff race? Yeah, it does, but I'm not sure if it's enough. But your thoughts on the Blake Griffin trade? I think for the Clippers, they just wanted to move off that money, and I think that's for them, that was a goal accomplished.
Yeah, I think Detroit is in my opinion, a definite winner in that trade. I think they needed, and they felt they needed, a superstar, and I believe that they feel that they have one. Um, They won, I think, their first 5 games with him. 4 of them Blake played, 1 of them he didn't. They, I believe, lost their last 2, but that team, I don't think they believe that they are finished building that team. But I think they feel now that they have their main piece. And I know Andre Drummond has been um, basically the focal point of that team. And they realize you can't win with him being the focal point of that team. So now you bring in a Blake Griffin, and you what you get with him is a guy who's going to get you 20 to 22 points a game. He's going to get you 8 to 10 rebounds, and he's going to not only get you 5 assists, but be a facilitator and a playmaker for other players. Um, the one thing about it is their other piece to that puzzle, Reggie Jackson, he's been injured. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play once Reggie Jackson gets back. But right now, they're playing with Ish Smith, who is a legitimate backup at the starting point guard position. But they're going to need to acquire another player, really good, all-star level player to consider themselves a competitor in the Eastern Conference. The Clippers, my thoughts on them was that they must be trying to start over. You have to me, the logic behind what they were doing didn't make much sense if that's not what you're trying to do. Tobias Harris is a nice player, but he's a player that you put alongside a player like Blake. You don't replace him. You don't replace a Blake Griffin with a Tobias Harris. The contract situation, they say they gave him that money because Chris Paul left, and they felt like that they needed to re-sign him, but they felt it was a bad deal. I didn't see it as a bad deal. The deal that I saw with that team as the bad deal was the Danilo Gallinari deal, where they gave him $20 million a year, and he's even more injury prone than Blake has been. I think he's played less than 20 games this year. But they're stuck under that contract. They didn't give themselves an out. So this, I believe, they felt is a way to lessen the salaries and the cap hit that they're taking by trading away Blake. And I think that they were and are going to try to, in a ways, tear that team down and rebuild. They wanted to get rid of DeAndre. And the word is that they were in serious talks up until the end of the trade deadline with Cleveland, in giving away DeAndre. The Lou Williams re-signing, I believe, to be not something where you go, okay, well, this is our guy, because he's, I believe, 31 now. That's not a guy who hits his peak year at 31 and you can't wait to re-sign him. I think that was a move because he was a free agent at the end of the year, to have him stabilized as a trade asset when we can trade him away and that other team won't go, well, we have to know whether or not we're going to be able to re-sign him in order to trade him. Now they know if we get him, we're going to have him for the next 2 to 3 years because he's under contract. So I think the move they're making is in order to acquire some assets over the next few years and try to rebuild that team. And I think trading away Blake Griffin was the first step.
I think so as well. I think they realized it would just be years and years and years of being in a number 7, number 8 seed, number 9 seed, number 10 seed purgatory in the Western Conference with the current team that they have constructed. What are they going to do? What they're going to do with DeAndre Jordan in the future, who knows? I know that he was heavily speculated in trade talks just before the trade deadline, but nothing materialized. So definitely curious to see what the Clippers have going from there. Obviously, they want to have at least some type of structure because Lou Williams did get signed to a 3-year deal. Whether or not he's going to stay there, because it is very cap friendly and he will be always a wanted commodity the way he plays, we'll have to wait and see. But definitely, the future for the Clippers looks kind of, topsy-turvy as far as what direction they truly want to go in. Before we head on out, I want to ask you one last thing. Are there any other of the trades that really stuck out to you that maybe you think might bring a new lease on life to a player, an Elfrid Payton, Emmanuel Mudiay, or someone else some other trade that you think that really stuck out to you as far as being a good trade for that team and something that they can hold on for their future?
There are two. One was the trade for Mirotic. I believe it was Mirotic to the Pelicans. I think that finally gives them another player. They've been sticking with Drew Holiday, Anthony Davis, DeMarcus Cousins for all this time, and the rest of their roster is null and void. They have no other help. And I think this gives them another player who, when the next season comes and DeMarcus Cousins is back and Anthony Davis is back and Drew Holiday is back, gives you somebody who you can put at that position, the small forward, and you can say, we've got that position solidified. As far as players that I think will get a new lease, mine is Jordan Clarkson. I think Jordan Clarkson is going to be he's going to relish in his role. I think his 3-point percentage, which has not been great, I think it will skyrocket. Not maybe elite shooter, but a competent shooter. When you play with a guy like LeBron, who's going to get you wide open shots and shots in your shooting pocket, I think it's going to be a lot easier. Whereas when he was with the Lakers, it was a lot more one-on-one, him creating by himself. And I saw the first game they played where they played Boston, and the joy on his face stood out to me more than anything else on that court. I watched him play with the Lakers. I've never seen him smile and be happy and run up and down the court with that kind of energy and joy. And I think this will be something that really makes him a better player.
Those are some great thoughts indeed. I think there's one last thing. Emmanuel Mudiay, this is his last chance as a starting point guard in the league that he can get with the New York Knicks. Between him or Ntilikina, as far as being that player that they want to go ahead and move forward with as a franchise, one of those two has to go ahead and branch out and be able to burst out as a frontline point guard, because the Knicks sorely need it, especially now with Kristaps Porzingis being hurt with his torn ACL and the future looking very hazy right now in New York. So I'm hopeful that Emmanuel Mudiay will somehow, on the flight from Denver to New York, will find a jump shot, because he's known very much as a guy who can distribute, he can create offense for others, but can't do so for his own. And unfortunately, that has held him back in the league. But he's still very young. He could still develop, and I'm hoping that New York will be the place that he can develop and get a head start. And almost like Elfrid Payton in Phoenix, be the point guard which everyone hoped and expected they would be when they both came out of college and into the draft. So I'm hopeful. Well, in case the Mudiay, it was obviously other things as well outside of college, but when they both came into the draft. So I'm hopeful that both will find a new lease on life in their respective new teams. I think that there is some possible signs that both may materialize as NBA, quality starting point guards in the future. Anthony, I'll tell you what, it's been great having you on, speculating on the NBA trade deadline. It's just been great having you aboard. If you got any questions for Anthony on the NBA, please feel free to give us a shout out. popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, Game Source, and Inside Sports on Facebook and Twitter. We will definitely be glad to record a segment with your thoughts on asking Anthony on the NBA and what's going on. But we're definitely going to have him back to preview the NBA playoffs. It's going to be right around the corner because there's only about 20 games left. So it's definitely something that we're both excited for, and we're definitely going to see if those trades for Cleveland and all those other players at the NBA trade deadline, they worked out. Anthony, I want to thank you again for being part of the show, and just it's always great to have you aboard, and I look forward to talking to you come playoff time.
Thanks for having me. Always love coming on.
Oh, you know what? Me too, my friend. Just great talking NBA and talking the round ball with you. And it's so great again to have you part of the pop culture cosmos and, of course, Inside Sports.